Hey everybody.
Hi.
How you do? I'm Barry Hanna.
You guys can just introduce yourself. Everybody knows who Barry is.
You do?
So you can
di-
start. These are all basically graduate students in the MFA program.
Okay. And did you mention something about our introducing people?
Yeah. You know,
May I ask what your name is?
Neil Winberg.
Neil. And is that yours, Neil?
Sure. No, here, you take this. It's just an announcement about Tom's book.
N-E-A-L.
N-E-I-L.
All right.
it's the Mormon I told you about.
I know about Mormons.
Want to get proselytized?
No, but it's interesting. And I know Suzanne, who got me at the airport. What is your name, dear?
I'm Shelley.
Shelley. With an E-Y?
I.E.
Oh, I-E. All right. Now, I like names and places very much because that's your backyard, and you should never ever be ashamed of anywhere you're from. Nobody's from more backwoods circumstances than I am. At least I'm not running a contest, but what I mean is it's just a totally unliterary Baptist village. So yes, I do know about Mormons, close, and the influence of religion on the young, deep. Where are you from, Suzanne Reed? What was that, North Augusta?
Mm-hmm.
And Neil, where are you from?
Idaho, Montana.
Yeah, I know that. I taught there at Missoula for a while. Shelley, where are you from, dear?
El Paso.
El Paso. Very interesting. One of my favorite writers in the world lives there, Cormac McCarthy. Is he available around? Do you see him walking around? Or?
Actually, rumor has it he eats at the Furs where I used to live.
He's at?
He eats at the Furs restaurant
Oh,
near where I used to
Furs.
live that I never saw.
Right. That's the only writer who never, who didn't answer a letter that I wrote, and I actually admired him for it. I would like to have that, that freedom not to reply. He's good at just not reply. He's turned down, I think, membership in the Academy of Arts and Sciences, and he's just good at not doing stuff except writing, which I think is very privileged. In fact, let me tell you something as I'm going along here. I know we're going to answer the question. So dedicated was he to his writing that he wouldn't even take $2,000 reading gigs, you know, like I'm on. Except my price is tripled. In fact, since I've been here, to get rid of me, it's gone up. You know, there's a price of getting me out of town. No, I'm getting many thousands, the best pay in America, to come here. I don't know about San Marcos, but it sure does pay well, and it's got marvelous literary intentions, and I'm going to be here. I don't know if you all will be around when I get here or not, but I will be here in 2004, counting on God and stuff. Okay. Now, what is your name?
Lee.
Lee, my daughter's name. Is it L-E-E?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, where are you from?
Hampton, South Carolina.
Yeah, Hampton. I love that state. And where's Hampton?
It's about 45 minutes from the Savannah River, about an hour from the coast.
Yeah. Hampton, a big old name down south. And your name?
Twister.
Twister. I bet your mother didn't call you that.
Yeah, she did.
She did?
I had a cousin that called me that. It was Christopher.
Are you Twister from Wyoming? A town in
Gillette is the nearest town.
Gillette, near Gillette.
45 miles from
All right, near Gillette. All right. What's your name, sir?
Matt.
Yep. My son. See, we're all family here. That's my son-in-law's name. Where are you from, Matt?
Santee, California.
Santee? Yeah. And you?
Stacy.
Stacy? Where you from?
From Sealy, Texas, which is outside of Houston.
Near Houston.
Sealy, S-E-A-L-Y.
Okay, and you, Miss?
Stephanie. I'm from Delaware.
Delaware. Nobody is from Delaware. This is the second person that alive they found from Delaware. You got a revolutionary tradition. I mean, you got a lot of revolutionary history, and
Something.
it's the only state that is a company, right? It used to be. What was it? What is the enormous facility there? The DuPont. Yes, I mean Delaware DuPont was always, like in the same sentence.
Now it's MDNA.
Really, MBNA. Gee, I give them a lot. All right, what is your name, sir?
Matt?
Another Matt, M-A-T-T?
Yes, sir.
All right, where are you from?
Sacramento, California.
Right. What's that like?
It's the least impressive of the big California cities.
Well, I have never been there, and that's why I'm asking. It's the state capital, and I've lived in L.A. I didn't know much about it.
It's the redneck city.
Is it?
So California.
Is it? Okay. What made you want to write early on in Sacramento?
Yeah.
Was it a reaction to Sacramento or a love of Sacramento?
I think a love for it.
Yeah, that often is the case. Your name, sir?
Mike,
Mike. Where are you from?
Stores, Connecticut.
Stores?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not where the submarine base is it?
No, it's where the University of Connecticut is.
Yes, University of Connecticut, with a great girls' basketball team,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Hadn't-
really good one.
Right. Now, am I going to talk to these technicians? These technicians have no history, no town. We know that. And then they're using us as ways for their jobs, and their jobs will pay more than ours. That's the horror of it. What is your name, sir?
Marcus,
All right, Marcus. What?
I'm from New Orleans.
New Orleans. All right. Well, of course, that's kind of my country. I grew up with that as our city. In Mississippi, we crossed the river, and I know much about New Orleans. So from the days when you could walk freely as a 12-year-old through the quarter, and everybody was helpful and sweet, and they still mainly are. Good town. One of our great towns, great cities. What is your name?
Nikki.
Nikki. Where are you from, Nikki?
I'm from Queens, New York.
Queens. And your name?
Anne Marie.
Anne Marie. Where? From?
I don't know. I never lived anywhere long enough to be.
Was your dad in the service?
No, he sold agricultural products.
Yeah. So did you live in a series of small towns or big towns?
In small towns.
In mainly what state?
Texas, Oklahoma, Illinois, and Indiana.
Yeah. Would you say that your passion for writing arose out of rootlessness? Was it a kind of strange take on?
Partly because I would start noticing differences between, people in Texas and Oklahoma and Illinois.
Right.
People didn't really like me commenting on it, so I had to write it down.
People either are made neurotic. My first wife was an Air Force brat and never finished a year of high school with the same place, And her dad was a cryptologist who helped launch the U-2 spy plane, which they're still using. And in her case, it was a disaster. We're no longer together, but I'm not going to blame everything on the service, but she had a hard time making friends. because you don't trust your friends to be there for any length. It's hard-bitten existential kind of existence in a way, isn't it? I mean, you have to create yourself every time, over and over. Do you know? That's the fun part. You can leave the wretched part behind. Yeah. What is your name? You're the director.
No. He's the director.
Yeah.
No, I'm faculty.
You're important, though.
In my own mind.
What is your name again?
Deborah.
Yes, Deborah. I know who you are. You are a writer, and you work here. Where did you grow up? I'm not. I hope you don't mind my treating you like
No, I don't.
another interviewee here.
Of course not.
All right,
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. So, what was your reaction to? Was it small town or big town?
Small.
Small. Was writing a way out, or was it? Did it ensure your privacy, or? How did it work for you?
It was like, it was like the only person to talk to. It was like that, like.
Oh, the book,
What you were
your
writing was-
your notebook or whatever.
Right, yeah.
It was your own. I understand that totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what is your name, dear?
Melissa.
Melissa. And that does the interviews of names. But where are you from?
Originally from Indiana.
Indiana. Now, people are going to call Indiana a bland Midwestern state. So what's your reaction to that as a writer?
Well, I was just writing a passage this morning where I tried to get some reference books on Indiana, and the first one I opened up, the very first line in this book called The Indiana Way said, there have never been any revolutions in Indiana state. So I would back that up.
Well, they served with the Union in the Civil War.
It just doesn't seem that, I think they'll go along with things, but it's not usually the eye of the storm, Indiana.
No. Raintree County. Did you ever see that movie? No. I was there in Raintree County. It was a Civil War movie, wasn't it? Maybe a book, I don't know. But you responded to Indiana as if you lived nowhere, or what was the corner drug a big deal in your life? I mean, how did you respond?
I think it would be far more interesting if I could sit down and write and say that my Uncle Joe worked at the corner store, but the Indiana I grew up in started with one McDonald's in the town and now has 3 and an outlet mall and a strip mall, and it looks like...
Yeah, I'm talking to a lot of people in this room that know that scene. That's the scene.
Right.
Yeah, that's the scene. And where did we get literature out of there? Now, I didn't do much homework for this, but I did some. I think I was horrified that there would be no questions. So I formed my own question. And I'm including good Tom Grimes in this because he's a New Yorker. New York produces, of course, has an enormous amount of literature. It's silly to deny that. They say Mississippi maybe has produced the most per acre. That's because I believe people talk to themselves a great deal. There was loneliness. You made your own fun. Yeah. But when I'm teaching Sartre back at Ole Miss, I haven't taught literary books in a long time. And he's not my favorite writer, but he has, his philosophy does attract. I like it actually summarized better than read. It's hellishly slow and to read Sartre all the way, but he made a visit to New York in 1954, and he visited other places like Venice, and he would say in his notebooks, and these came out as philosophy and sayings, Venice is where I am not, okay? So, I mean, the canals, everything. He defined Venice as where I am not. It is a city entirely where I am not. Now, of course, he thought Paris was the capital of the world, and he saw the war end there. But his trip to New York brought him this view. He saw, this was 54, and New York has gotten less open. It was a more open New York between the skyscrapers in 54. And I think it was that upright arrogance of New York to foreigners that the Al-Qaeda attacked when they hit 9/11. That uprightness horrifies a lot of Europeans as well as Mideasterners. Anyway, it just shouldn't exist. It seems hellish, devilish. But I thought Tom would be interested that Sartre saw New York as a place where infinite spaces were like planes between the buildings. And he was depressed by New York, and as you would expect Sartre to be. Well, you know, Frenchmen in America, come on. It's like this. A law over there to be pissed off about us, but but anyway, he found that these spaces between the up spaces and the spaces between the buildings promised an infinite consciousness which led to nothingness. In other words, he found it sterile with planes between it. Certainly Tom Grimes, who was, I don't know, were you born, yes, 54?
That was the year.
Yeah. You didn't, when you were 10, say 64, you didn't have this impression, did you? 10 years
My
old.
father worked in the trade center, actually, and he worked down there. I don't know, and my father loved the city, so he was always proselytizing on behalf of the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building. And no, it didn't depress me at all. I always felt
It doesn't depress New Yorkers. It's just New York. Right, the world's best city. I've lived in it, and I found it myself with too much freedom. I was trying to write a book. It was the worst book I've written yet. There was too much. There was a lot free to do in the city at that time, and had too much freedom. It was too fascinating. You know, it was just too fascinating for a hick like me. I thought that's where you went to write great books, but I should have stayed at home, where I was in South Carolina, which was my state, Mississippi, but I was living in Clemson then. But Sartre goes on to say about the consciousness. Of course, he was a writer, and this is what you may have felt as a writer. He felt the absolute and terrible freedom of the individual, burdened with a consciousness which could never justify itself. And I thought that was pretty good, because maybe that's why you're here in this school, studying writing, wanting to be writers. We've just got too much mind, and we need to justify that mind. And telling stories is certainly one way of doing it. I think too damn much. Getting from here to the airport, home, which is, unless the plane goes down, is really just kind of like running past the blackberry patch and, you know, the outhouse and over the hill. It's nothing. And yet you're conscious, ba-bomb, 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 everything. You know how it does you? This, that. Some of us are even have to the consciousness of sickness. I mean, consciousness is just overflowing so much, where we get into a sickness. But I think that this terrible freedom that we enjoy also makes us somewhat guilty, and that is why we want to justify this much thought. Because look, what the thought that I've expended from coming from little bitty Oxford, Mississippi to Memphis Airport, to Austin Airport, to San Marcos, is enormous. Enormous. And I was just standing up in my room today, not writing, just standing around, just like like I was loitering in some places, you know. I don't know, looking out the building, waiting, you know. Hey, good rain, and I didn't want to work, and yet I was thinking, just thinking too much. But I believe that you don't need to think that much, frankly. I don't think, although you also see in the airports people who worry you like they did in a line, commuter line, on a bus in the Rue Saint-Michel. Sartre saw these people waiting in line to work. And then he said, here's another horror, the serial existence. You have no existence until the bus. Then you have an existence for a while, which is the unity, an artificial community. And then you get off and you are in the serial existence. And so you're never finding a spot. There are just lost serial existences. The best thing, to come back to something a little more positive about writing and all of us, and that's why I love these towns. This is very cosmopolitan. A lot of places, southern, eastern, and maybe the most cosmopolitan group I've talked to lately. As an existentialist, he said the history of man is an adventure of nature. So that's what existential is that you are nothing until you choose. Existence precedes essence, so that you do with this terrible freedom, this burden, and you realize that you are always in an adventure of nature. There is no other reason for man. He was an atheist, by the way. Camus was not quite an atheist. He wanted to keep God in, but he fought God, like most of us, or a lot of us. I'm a Christian, but I fight God. I don't know much about God, and horror, and needless suffering. Don't get it. Don't get it. You understand? And I'm a lot older than you. I don't get it. But isn't this good? The history of man is an adventure of nature, like nature just throwing you up. What's going to happen? Every minute of every day, you choose to write or not write. And even if you fail, I must say, even if you fail at writing, it's work. It is work. And it can be lovely work, and it can be devastating work. The other existentialists we're studying, and this is for writers, literature for writers is this class I'm teaching. I really like it. I might teach it again here, maybe. Is that possible? Or do you teach it only a workshop?
There's slated for workshop, if you want to take on more classes.
I don't know, no. No, I thought we were talking.
You can have the
No, I'm just kidding you. I know my main job would be the workshop, but anyway, to write, to understand most of Camus, you should read one little short essay called The Myth of Sisyphus, in his book, The Myth of Sisyphus. And in that, Sisyphus has been condemned by the gods for a number of things. For one thing, scoffing at them and just having levity about them like I'm doing now. The other thing was messing up some relationships between gods and humans. Anyway, they put him down there in hell. Pluto did. Pluto, the god of hell. Where he has to roll this enormous boulder up a mountain. Okay? Up a mountain. And he gets to the top, and that boulder just rolled back down. Yeah. And he said, so much is Sisyphus involved in the rock, I have to imagine him as stone himself. And yet he says, when Sisyphus turns, sees that rock rolling down, again, I imagine him happy. Happy. And it is quite true. You meet a lot of folks out there slinging hash, selling shoes, or doing the equivalent of rolling boulders uphill and letting them roll down who are a lot happier than you are. You ever notice that? Yeah. You wouldn't trade places, probably. You'd like to keep being an anxious intellectual at low pay for a while. But they are happy in their work. And I think when I became a writer, I thought it was the best damn thing that a man or a woman could do with himself. I had no doubts. That idea has passed because maybe even some of the best lines are going into television now. I don't know. But writing is not as sexy as it used to be. You used to be able to get dates just by publishing one kind of beatnik poem in the school lit journal. You know, I don't know if somebody says you can't get anything for publishing a poem in the school literary magazine. But I really come from an, I guess it's old-fashioned generation who thought that writing was the best thing you could possibly do with yourself. And you intended or you expected to be poor a while. No surprise. You intended to struggle. That was part of the romance, you know. You would even get tuberculosis. You know, that goes along with it. In the older days, you needed to have tuberculosis to be. I mean, Camus had it. Kafka, Keats. There's a candidate. You know, I mean, there's a candidate school for tuberculosis. And one woman got so disturbed about this literary tuberculosis idea that she wrote a book demystifying tuberculosis, because you don't want it, of course. You do not want it. It just sounds romantic on the outside, okay? It's like you spit a little blood and you go in there and write something immortal. What's the big deal? You know, what's the big deal? Apparently there's more to it. And of course Camus, another existentialist, spent every day expecting to die next week, and he won the Nobel Prize, and he in 57 and in 60 he dies in a car wreck. Isn't that like it? Isn't that like it should be for these men who believe in the absurd and the way that what life gives us? You live to die next week of tuberculosis. You're a heavy smoker, as Camus was. And then you crash into a tree. What am I talking about? I'm talking about Sartre, Camus, Faulkner, Hemingway, Flannery O'Connor, not just inspiring, but inflaming me. I don't know how they did you. You know, I mean, it was so beautiful what they were doing. What's so beautiful to take on the universe. And the universe was sometimes the barbershop. You know, it's a barbershop and a couple of old geezers. You start with what you know. That's why you should never, I'll reiterate, be ashamed of where you are or what you've been. That's your backyard, baby. That is your easel. You're going to have that lifelong. And the better you know it, and the sooner you become the genius on your place, it's just better for you. I mean, you have a stage. After all, you're an entertainer. And most young writers spend half their careers finding a stage. They can't find anything solid. 2 people, conflict, some furniture. That's all you need to write. When I was like your age, a person you've never heard of probably came to class and spoke like this, and I was most impressed. I went to the University of Arkansas and got an MFA back in the 60s. And it was Erskine Caldwell. Have you ever heard of God's Little Acre or Tobacco Road? Well, he was a big seller, massive bestseller. But he didn't do anything but work. And people ask him, who do you read? I don't read anybody. Said next week I'm going to just put some paper in my typewriter and not change a word, just for an experiment. So I was really drawn to this guy who claimed not even to read Shakespeare or anybody. That's not a voice heard too much, is it? But you know what I was impressed by, although he wrote 50 books, nobody remembers but the two, was the work. You know, I'm just being a writer. I think we get to be too much readers. Let's face it, we're too much receivers already. Television, videos, the computer act is more receiving than acting, is it not? And so that even you can read too much as writers also, I believe. I don't think you just ought to have a gang of books, although that usually follows with writers. I don't meet many unread writers. But if you face up to the truth, reading itself can become paralysis. Can it not? Just as the computer can. Graduate study itself can become a paralysis, an end in itself. You've got to quit reading Hemingway sometime and start writing, you know? And say, I don't care how bad it is, I'm going to give it a try. I still think it's a lovely and honorable thing to be a writer. I still do. And I've been very lucky by what I've been given in the way of some skill and the good people I've run into because of my work. I'm not bragging at all. It just happens. I'm a lot older than you. I mean, people invite me to nice places like Swanee, and you just meet good folks. But I think that you ought to find your stage, realize that you are man as an adventure of nature, that is a woman too, and that you're existing the first time you do this. See? I always liked writing because it was cheap too. You don't have to carry around giant sculptures, you don't have to have, there's nothing that. There you go. You're in business, and you're not fooling around. You're not rehearsing. You're in business already. Just start a few sentences, and if they're good, they'll generate themselves. They'll generate beginning, middle, ending, and I tell my students, beginning, middle, ending thrillers. That's about all you need as a writer. The rules are not complex. It's just the job that's hard. The job is tough, but the rules are simple, like tennis. Don't knock it out, and don't knock it in the net. That's pretty simple. But it's very, very hard to do. And it's beautiful when it's well done, isn't it, tennis? Don't you like it? I do. Okay. This isn't much question and answer, is it? But you see how much I got out of that homework I did last night for you? I extrapolated a little bit. What questions do you have? Nothing stupid, don't worry. Now, there's no stupid question about writing.
I have a question about, try to formulate it in an understandable manner. I've just started reading Yonder Stands Your Orphan, and one of the things that I like about it so far is that the characters seem to just breed more characters and more characters.
Yeah.
It's an interesting to me.
And my wife, on the other hand, my wife said, "You got everybody in the world in this book." It annoyed her. I mean, I was breeding. I like to breed characters. Go ahead.
And I was wondering if that all started with one character as the seed of all that, or the place is what generated
The place would appear in the old people. generated. I've been after those people in the 70s. I wrote about them. I'll probably read about them whenever I read today, 3:30. And it's the place about when I was 15 years old that I visited with some old people at a kind of rundown resort, Bass Lake. And they were marvelous to me then. And I found out later that they were lying. That they were lying about, as old people will, about making themselves interesting. So there, it was the water lapping on the piles and the old men just being old, not knowing quite how to be old, as we don't know how to be anything, 17 or anything. Or the adventure in nature. I remember that, right? The adventure of nature. So yes, it was that. And I intend to write further stories about the crowd at the pier, and they will be kind. And they'll be kinder and gentler. And I am a Christian. I've never written anything particularly Christian. And I wonder what it would be like to write something. I do believe there's a church in You Understand Your Orphan, and I believe in those Christians as strange ruffians as they are. It's the power of Christ itself, just the simple power of Christ that I adore. I am not theologically sound, okay, otherwise. So I think that, because you know why? Because I've been lying a great deal. As an entertainer, you exaggerate often, and I often have used violence because I myself am bored in my writing. No getting around it. I like it. I like it, just like a kid does on a video machine.
What do you think about, I want you to talk about like the reaction to violence within the story or novel, rather than like the reader reaction. I think that's the one that's talked about the most.
The character or the reader?
The character's reaction to violence. Like, like I guess, you know, there's a different reaction if you're using it for purposes of comedy than, you know, for purposes of drama, but.
Well, Suzanne, that would depend on you so much, and not me. I think you're certainly old enough to experience some car wrecks that killed people. Not you. I mean, you have lost people, have you not?
No.
You've not lost a relative, and in any
No.
capricious or violent way. You're lucky. San Marcos, I would imagine, 3 or 4 students die a year in car wrecks, do they not? Most campuses they do. But yes, I think it would depend on you, and certainly not on me. What?
I just have
What?
like, I've had violence creeping, well maybe not creeping, just kind of like barging into every piece that I've written for the past year and a half. And the characters always respond, as it said in workshop, in a strange, odd, or inappropriate manner. And I was just trying to place that.
You know what you just said could apply to a failed work or a work of genius. Responding in an inappropriate manner is what life is about, almost. You know, I mean, you might be on to the right thing. It's hard for me to answer this question up in the air like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of violence.
Do you think it's hurting your stories that you're?
Well, I mean, there's this, what I always think of is when I first began as a writer, I was kind of distraught by the fact that my stories all seem to have the same, you know, themes, motifs, images. And, you know, I was told not to worry about that. That's good. That's something that you're always going to have as a writer. You know, the same themes. So I'm kind of thinking of violence as a theme. I guess it's kind of it's something that I can't get away from at all.
I don't think you should. It may be unfortunate, but you may be working something out from inside that needs to be on the page. Having written a couple of 3 stories of violence, you might be able to move on without it. I don't know. I still like it, and it's.
That's a problem.
But the thing it can come about as say writers through fatigue sometimes, through fatigue at writing. You just don't have enough imagination left to do anything but violence. right. And that can happen. I see that with my students all the time.
Amount of
A
imagination.
pistol is a beautiful way to end a story. You know, you just stop it. You shoot somebody. It can be very lazy and even boring. In fact, a friend of mine once taught in New York, his name was Richard Price, and he told the class after he'd read a couple of sets of stories, all right, no suicide, no guns. Because it was becoming a way to stop a story rather than to end it. Regardless of 9/11 and all, however, at this stage of my life, I think I should come forth and try to make interesting, which is the big thing, the fact that mainly kind people have been my history, small acts of kindness. You know, they have not been violent, but they've been small acts of kindness. I like Texans for that reason. You just go, not huge acts, but you go out of your way a little bit, you know? I like that attitude, but it doesn't have to be Texas, but Texas is known for it. Small acts of kindness, how do you dramatize them? There have been some good people, very fine writers who've dealt with this. Why not deal with that as well as existential angst? You know, the tough thing is to make these small acts of kindness interesting, because, you know, I'm sort of friends, acquaintance, let's say. I don't see him anymore, but you know the mega-selling writer John Grisham. He's from Oxford, Mississippi, and he says he's tried to write about good lawyers, as you just can't. They're not interesting. And John is a real Christian. I mean, he goes to Baptist church, and he's a kindly guy. He supports our MFA program at Ole Miss. It would fold if he pulled out. I like him for that reason. I don't read him much, but I don't mean that to be a snobbish way. It's just not my cup of tea. But he can't dramatize the good. Does a book about just a good woman, a good man come to mind to you?
Dostoevsky's Idiot.
Right, the idiot.
And he said it was his failure. He couldn't do it.
Yeah, and the Alyosha in the Karamazov was the youthful, kindly son of the Karamazov.
But he's balanced by
Right, right, right. So I think if Suzanne, if it's not just a habitual or a reaction to pop culture, which would be bad. I don't see anything wrong with your writing about violence if you're interested in it. Nothing. Nothing.
Because I am.
Right. I think, well, you know who else is, I don't know anything much about Suzanne, but who else is very interested in violence is Joyce Carol Oates. You know, she's a little tiny, brittle woman. I met her once, and she writes about Mike Tyson and boxing. What the hell is? And I mean, if you saw her at ringside, who is? She would be like interplanetary. She is strange, little tiny thing.
Flannery O'Connor.
Flannery O'Connor, certainly. It seems that Flannery O'Connor was either working out aggression against, let's say, hard-shelled Pentecostals, or that she was cheering for them. I can't figure it out, whether she's persecuting them or admiring them. You know, people who put lime in their eyes for Jesus, and well, on the face of it, it doesn't sound just like the worst thing you can do, and yet people in her work do that and put rocks in their shoes so their way will be, hard and hurtful to to hurt for Christ, I don't get that message from Christ. That having died on the cross, I don't know that putting lime in your eyes is gonna. Well, what is that about? What is that? You can help more people if you can see, right? Unless you are a great preacher and they roll you in. But yes, Flannery O'Connor, and she ignited the fire. I said, whoa! When I found, I didn't find her out till I was in grad school. Is it time?
I'm gonna go. You
Yeah.
stay.
But let me tell you one of the myths. They always say that the stuff about Southern violence and guns and drinking. I've heard that all my life. Southern violence. This does not breed violent writing automatically. But I've never had more than, my dog dying and losing some friends early in the normal course of life. Happened to me. A few fist fights early on, didn't I? But I'm going to try to twist this into, I'm not interested in guns at all, although I have a lot of them, okay? They're just like CDs to me. I guess I'm kind of Texan like that. I got 3 .22 pistols, so I like to shoot beer cans. I don't even hunt, don't want to hurt animals. But, and they're around my den as like book holders, just nice looking 22s or something. What does it mean? Is there violence in my soul? Do I need to connect with these metallic instruments to write? I don't know. I, for all my violence, have not used much gunplay in my work. And I don't think Southerners are given over to violence any more than other people, frankly. I believe Scots and Irish people are. But study something like this. I was telling Tom, on 60 Minutes last weekend, it was about the gun thing. All right. The NRA, In America, 11,500 people die by gun every year. 11,000. Okay? In Canada, which also has plenty of guns, it was like 90. So there is something going on here, definitely. It's not just the guns. Canada is a frontier country. Three guns a home, in some places. I think it's interesting to study ourselves like that and be honest. And to be frank, I don't know what causes the shooting. You don't even hear of fist fights anymore. It's always the gun, right? Fist fights were good. It's like nursery school now. But none of these statistics and none of the Southernism, none of it has anything at all to do with why I have employed violence. I think it's a personal thing with me, Suzanne. And I'm, making. Do you all disdain violence so much as an epidemic that you abstain from it in your work? Is that your reaction?
I'm more interested in psychological violence.
More like, which is very vicious, isn't it? It's very killing. Yeah. Didn't you want this? I wrote them. Right. It's precious to me now.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, right.
I have students going on.
I have a cigarette to smoke too. Pretty soon, the reading is at 3:30.
Yeah.
Right. Somebody's going to steer me downstairs or something. Yeah.
Why don't you wrap up in a couple?
Yeah. The reason that I have talked mainly during this time is that when I was your age, I didn't ask questions, frankly. And I didn't expect to be bombarded with questions. So forgive me if I've lectured too much. But I frankly didn't have, I was pretty ignorant. You're a lot sharper than I was as far as being cosmopolitan. I didn't write a good story till I was like 23. I wrote stories that pleased professors, which is different. Understand that? Because I hope you go for what we go for at Ole Miss, Iowa. I go for good books for my students, good publications, stories. But that's the reason I brought my own kit in here. You know, again, to reiterate, your place doesn't even have to be fascinating for you to write about it. You just got to be there very solidly, I think. It helps, place helps so much. In fact, Flannery O'Connor said this. You don't have to be, by the way, we don't want a local colorist. I don't care about, you know, the number of moose skulls in Wyoming, you know, wherever the hell you're from, sir. No, I mean, no, pardon me, I'm looking it up. Did we not have an Idaho guy here? Yeah, Idaho guy left, so we can insult him with impunity. Yeah, we don't need his crummy town with its local color. What I'm saying is, I hate the local color edges of the South, or the too sweet waitresses. You know what I'm talking about? Honey, come over here. Just don't. You know, if it comes from the spirit or right out of the gut, fine. But I don't want you to, I'm not caring about local color. Regionalism, however, is what you want. Flannery O'Connor said that all great literature is regional. I don't know. You could stretch that so many ways, saying that, well, indeed, oh, this guy's in a hotel in some city in Europe. It's regional. But I'll tell you, the worst stories I get are the ones that happened nowhere, and they're written for eternity. They're written, actually, science fiction is the worst. And I forget to tell them always, it's fine if you write science fiction if you know some science. You know? Sure, write science fiction. Fantasy's great, but fantasy is tough, you know, making us believe that rabbits talk. Watership Down, or the Hobbit books, which I loved, you know. And that's the toughest, I think, fantasy, if you're writing for an adult crowd. Yeah. But regional puts you somewhere. And the more regional you are, I believe it's John Crow Ransom said, the more universal you become. In other words, the more Kentucky it is, the more firmer you are in Kentucky, the more universal it becomes. So a young writer, or no writer, should worry about being universal when you write. It will be universal if it's there and it's good. Isn't that great? Because you don't have to worry about being a world-class thinker. Thank God. Your story will have wonderful thought if it's told well. Don't worry about that stuff. You'll pick that up from life, and not from books, probably. That's enough talk for me for a while. Is that about enough? Okay. Yeah. Thanks for listening.